there, my name is Daniel Franco and this is the Creating Synergy podcast, your business and leadership podcast where we speak to high-profile leaders and thinkers about their careers and dig deep by asking the questions we all want the answers to, uncovering their stories, strategies, leadership lessons and their secrets to success. Welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco, Managing Director of Synergy IQ and host of Creating Synergy. Today we've got a very, very well-known man in the South Australian circles and Australian circles, Commissioner of Police, Grant Stevens. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Very, very excited to have you here. It's been on the cards for a while now and finally got you in the room, so very happy to start off and to understand you and understand the trajectory of your life and how you've ended up being, the Commissioner of Police. What do we need to understand about your earliest context?
Well, I suppose to start off, how I became the Commissioner of Police is a question I ask myself a lot. But from an early days sort of context, I had what you describe as a pretty normal childhood. I would say I was at best an average student through my schooling career, and I put that down to having no sense of direction. So I didn't see any real need or sort of imperative to apply myself in school. And I think every report that I had through my high school days made a reference to could be doing better. Social.
Speaking too much,
yeah. Should sit closer to the front. Needs to engage more. I wasn't a terrible student, but I just, I don't think I took advantage of the opportunity to the extent that I could. And on finishing school, I started work almost immediately. I had an after school hours job at a Target at Tea Tree Plaza, and they offered me employment virtually straight away when I finished school. So I went from school straight into work, and it was probably an early call on my part, but I didn't think retail was a career path I was interested in after about 6 months.
I did Harris Scarf.
Oh, there you go.
I think in the same sort of area that you worked in, which was like men's retail.
I started off in China and glass, but
did you?
Interestingly, I was moved very quickly from China and glass into menswear, so
good.
Less damage.
Yeah, I think I lasted a week.
Yeah. So I took a half day off very close to the end of the year in 1981.
Yeah.
And I was just coming in to see what was available. I was going to visit the police and maybe the army, the fire brigade, and just see what they were offering. And I happened to go to the police headquarters first, and I walked into their recruiting section just as they were trying to find a few more people to complete a cadet course starting in January 1982.
Yeah.
And they turned me around very quickly through the recruiting process, and I found myself standing on the steps of police headquarters, having accepted a position on a cadet course, wondering what the hell I'd done. So
that escalated quickly.
Yeah, it did, Ron Burgundy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I went home and told my parents. My mum was horrified. Yeah. She was very worried about policing as a career and the risks that people attribute to policing. Mm-hmm. And I started down at the academy in January 1982, and very quickly found that there's a really strong connection with that vocation, and that connection created the imperative that I lacked in school, and the study, the drive, the motivation just came really naturally. So I did quite well through the cadet course and graduated like everyone does. At that time, it was a 2-year course. Graduated and went on to patrols, and that's where it all started. So I found myself in policing virtually by accident. There was no long-term ambition to join the police, no family connection to policing, and that was the start of my career in South Australia Police.
Brilliant. I was sitting at my table last night having dinner with my family, and I asked my children, I said, Grant Stevens, the Commissioner of Police, that you've seen him on the TV. And they went, yeah. I said, what's one question that you have that you would like to ask Grant? And I feel like it fits in so tightly with what we've just been talking about. And my daughter Isla, she said, ask him, what's one childhood memory that he looks back on and smiles?
One childhood memory. My parents' property had quite a bit of land attached to it, and there was a creek running through it, and we had this massive tree that me and a few friends tied a rope swing in, and we had a steel bar as the handle, and this swing became more and more aggressive or dangerous, and one of my mates who was a bit shorter than the rest of us adjusted the knot on the swing, and he got up into the tree and he jumped out, and his hands slipped, or the bar slipped in, and he just went face first into the creek bed.
Oh, ouch!
And I still laugh at that when I think about it. So yeah, that's a childhood memory.
There's something about people falling over and hurting themselves.
Yeah. As long as it's not you, it's funny.
Exactly. So. I have a similar one where I think it was one New Year's evening, and one of my very good friends, you were an 18-year-old, I think, we were around 18 at the time, and as you do, you get into a bit of mischief, and you knock on doors and do the knock and run sort of thing, and my mate knocked on the door, and he tripped over the porch step, laid flat on the ground, and the person came out and see this guy just laying on the ground. So it was a very, very funny time. I want to ask one question. You talked about Target and working in the retail section. I want to ask about counting socks and what that had and what impact that had.
That was probably the catalyst for taking a half a day off to find out what my options were. It was a stock take on a Saturday afternoon. This is back when retail stores closed at midday on Saturdays, and we had to do a stock take in the afternoon, and I was given the job of counting the socks, and there was racks of socks, and I can't remember
pairs of socks, or you had to sort them into pairs.
They were all on display.
Okay,
but for stock taking purposes, we needed to know how many were there.
Yeah. So
my job was to count them, and I can't remember the exact number. It was somewhere like 1,300 pairs of socks.
Yeah, wow.
And my manager, when I went to her with the number of socks, said, "No, that can't be right. Do it again." And I think that was a pivot point for me in terms of Grant Stevens and retail not being a good fit.
It's not.
It was a premature call on my part, but if you look back, I suppose it was a pretty good call in hindsight.
Intersection in your life. You are a family focused man. You say you have a pretty normal upbringing. You've moved into a world now where you have 5 children.
Yeah.
The other week, I was in your office and we were discussing the podcast, and I saw a picture of Bart Simpson on the wall. Can you explain what that represents in your life?
That was drawn by my youngest son. Now that must have been, he's 17 now, so it must have been at least 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's a pretty good drawing for him.
He was very proud of it, and so was I. And I had the option of using the picture of Bart Simpson that he drew, or when he was in about the same time in primary school, they had a Father's Day thing where they had to draw pictures of their dads, and I went along, as we all did, and looking for the picture of me, drawn by
a strapping man,
drawn by my youngest son. And my son was the only one who had to use the grey crayon for the dad's hair. So, yeah, I'm still hurt by that.
He still wouldn't be like mine. There'd be no hair at all.
No, well, that's the lesser of two evils, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. That's brilliant. So as a father, obviously I think what that pointed out to me was you're clearly a father, like a family man and a proud father at that as well. And you hear that a lot through your media and your talk, and often refer to the family and all the interviews you have done. As a father and as a husband, how would you like your family to think of you?
Well, I suppose I'd like them to be proud of what I do, and I think my family are. And I'm sure it must be challenging for my kids as they've gone through school with the job, particularly my younger children. When I've had a larger profile in South Australia, that wouldn't have been easy all the time. But my kids are pretty balanced as well, so I think they've been able to take that in their stride. But I'd hope that they're proud of me for what I've achieved through work, but more importantly that they think I'm a good dad. That they feel like I've been there for them. It's not always the case that you can be there for every single thing, but it's always been a sort of a central focus for me is to make sure I'm there for all the important stuff. And even in my earlier days as an executive, I'd make sure I was home for dinner and drop the kids off to school whenever I could. Get to those horrible Christmas shows that the kids do. All of those things.
The cheesy ones.
Yeah. It's that is genuinely great sacrifice sitting through those things. But as a parent, it's really important that you're there. You know, you watch your kid on stage for 2.5 minutes, and then you sit there for another 2 hours watching everyone else's kids.
Yeah.
But I'd hope that they think I've been a good dad.
How do you realise your visions in life and in your career and manage the time with your family, and how does it intertwine for you?
I'm not sure if it's a deliberate thing. I think it's either who you are. There have been times in my professional life where the work obligations have had to take priority, and it's about knowing that that's not the status quo, that's not the norm, and switching back to what is important, and that is family. Being there for all of those important things and being engaged, being present, and not letting that work demand override your obligations to your family, because there's the old saying, no one lies on their deathbed wishing they'd spent more time at work.
Yeah,
so
correct.
there's a lot of sense in that. So just I think a lot of people do it naturally.
Yeah.
Some professional responsibilities have the potential to drag you away. It's about knowing when it's necessary and when it's not.
Yeah. I guess that question comes from, like, I run a business. Synergy IQ is the business that owns Creating Synergy. And I can get caught up in the moment of work, and I can get caught up in I need to do this. Therefore, naturally, the family's love is unconditional. That's the part that will sacrifice the most. And that's a choice. I am and have been working really hard on making sure I've never missed a basketball game.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of this sort of stuff. When it comes to the sporting and anything that they do outside of school, I'm always there. But I guess with your situation, the choice isn't always there, right? It is, I have to do this as part of my role. How do you manage that? And how does your family understand that?
I'm probably not unique. There's a lot of people who work shift work, and that shift work obligation takes you away from your family during the times when other parents, the 9 to 5 arrangement permits you to be there for every weekend activity or every evening activity. That's a consequence of being involved in an industry that requires a 24/7 response. Yeah. But the obligations of the senior leadership roles, they are more insidious in the way that they encroach, because you take work home with you, or you spend more time at the office to get things done, and in this particular role, there's a lot of engagements that occur after hours that you have to participate in. So it's about keeping it in the forefront of your mind that there's got to be a separation between work and family, and also acknowledging that, as I said, there are times when you need to make that commitment to work. If you're establishing a new business, then you are going to have to invest more in it at that time than you will into the future.
Correct,
so, it's almost like you're borrowing from that credit. You're borrowing that credit from that you have with your family because of the previous investment. But you'll be paying it back, and you should be paying it back. And it's about recognising. A lot of people talk about work-life balance, and I don't prescribe to that concept. Because for me, it suggests work is something separate to life. It's about balance generally, and it's never going to be 50-50. It should always be that the family gets more of your time than work does, but there will be times during your career that you have to invest more in work, whether it's to study for a particular promotional opportunity, or in an emergency management sense, when you're going to be working 15 hours a day because of a bushfire threat or something. That's the balance.
Correct.
And making sure you maintain a perspective on where your time is best spent.
Yeah. It's a bit like be fluid, right? Be fluid with your time, but you just want to make sure that glass is not tilted too much to one side.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm, I firmly believe in that approach, but I'm as guilty as anyone as to having let it slip. And it's not so much in my time as a manager. I think I've maintained a pretty good perspective there. But it was when I was in the drug squad. The work was dynamic. It was really interesting. We were working with a really good group of people who were just as committed to the job as I was, and there was a real tendency to hang around at work a lot more, get involved in jobs, and not pull stumps when you probably should.
Yeah.
So that I reflect on that time and thinking, I probably lost a little bit of balance there.
Yeah. I think that goes with any. I mean, it goes to the point of you said before, which is starting the new business and you're invested into it. There's this element of love when you start your own business. You love what you do. You're enjoying it. And not everyone has the luxury of loving what they do, but you obviously really enjoyed your role. I think that's probably where because you hear, Steve Jobs and all these people, they all come out and they say, love what you do. And yes, absolutely. But loving what you do can also mean that that part of your life is going to be sacrificed, such as family, doesn't it? Because it's like, I actually love what I'm doing. This is my hobby as well as my job. Yeah. I want to spend more time here.
Yeah, it's just reminding yourself what's important.
Correct.
Yeah. And knowing when to invest in different parts of your life.
Well, you talked about work-life balance, and I know you don't prescribe. I'm much of the same. It all just blends into one beautiful ecosystem. I do want to ask about what people's viewpoint are in your life, in your outside of work life, personal life, and the role that nepotism might come into it, where people are asking you for favours as commissioner of police, and I know integrity is got to be high on your value set. Is it something that you have experienced where people have said, "Oh, I've got a speeding fine, can you get me off?" Or is there any?
Those sorts of things are pretty easy to dismiss. Your true friends don't ask you that.
Exactly.
It's people who, for some reason, have your phone number in their contacts list that you never hear from. They're the ones. You'll get that out of the blue phone call from an acquaintance. G'day Grant, how you going? How's things? How's the family? Oh, by the way. No, sorry, mate, can't do that.
Old school mates back in the day.
So that does happen, but it's pretty easily.
It would be.
And seriously, true friends, they ask for advice, which is what friends are there for. But they've never been There's never been a true friend that's tried to compromise.
And 100%. And I think that's the same is true for business owners who are starting in that world. I mean, the best way to support anyone who is starting their own business is actually to buy their product and buy it at full price. Do not ask for discount. It's about supporting them in their role and helping them promote and do all the above. There's a bit of tall poppy syndrome here in South Australia where that doesn't happen as much as we would like.
Yeah, true. I think that's probably an Australian phenomenon rather than just South Australia.
That's true. So what was it like through the early years of being a police officer and the decisions that you've made along the way, obviously into the trajectory of becoming police commissioner? Were they thoughtful? Were they with the intent of, or consciously with the intent of becoming the top dog one day, or was it the just pot luck that you ended up where you are?
I'd like to think more than pot luck, but it was never like a career plan to be the Commissioner of Police. Well, when I graduated from the academy in December 1983, I'd achieved my goal of becoming a police officer.
Yeah.
And there's such a diversity of roles that you can undertake that I was just having a ball coming to work. It was great fun.
Yeah.
It was interesting work, good people, a really solid team. Doing foot patrols in the city, car patrols, then moving out into the northern suburbs. It was a completely different style of work out there, different people. So it was almost day by day, turning up to work, having a good time, and really enjoying the work we were doing. And it was after a couple of years I started to think about what's after patrols. I didn't have a plan when I started as a police officer what would come after those first couple of years, and I decided to pursue a career in the CIB as a detective. So I took that step. Thoroughly enjoyed that. It was just an evolution of my policing career, I suppose. There was no deliberate pathway that I'd set out. So after having been a detective in in regional or metropolitan CIBs. I then moved into the specialist squads, did a little bit of time in the major crime investigation area, investigating homicides, and then into the drug investigations, which was just excellent. I really enjoyed that. And then this opportunity came up, not one that I'd planned for or envisaged, but I had a chance to become involved in training other police officers in relation to drug investigations. So I took that step, and that led to more exposure with senior managers, and that resulted in a promotion into the intelligence arena, an unplanned step, that an opportunity presented, and I took the step. That led to me being able to apply for and get onto the inspector's course, which was the course that develops you to become a commissioned officer, one of the senior managers. And if I'm honest, I don't think I really thought about being the commissioner until I was appointed the deputy commissioner.
Okay, wow.
So that was in 2012, and it's I knew then that the commissioner of the day was only going to be the commissioner for 3 years. He'd made that quite clear, and I was his deputy. And that was the realisation that there's a real possibility here that I might end up as the commissioner if the cards fall the right way.
Yeah.
And Gary Burns, who was the commissioner, essentially provided me a 3-year opportunity to develop and prepare for that opportunity.
Yeah, amazing. I want to jump back to patrols, and I think I heard an interview with you. It might have been with Cornsey or one of the interviews, many that you've done. And you said that in your first time as a patrol officer, you experienced this sense of overwhelm, and going out onto site or wherever it may have been. And then as I'm listening to you, as you rising amongst the ranks, is this that initial sense of overwhelm when you're on site, and all of a sudden, you're in potential conflicting situations that aren't so comfortable. And as you rise up those ranks, the sense of overwhelm will only become more and more and more, just with the more knowledge that you know. You know the old saying, the more you know, the more you realise the less you know. As you go up those ranks, what I'm really interested in is that something that has naturally come to you and through experience, the dealing with the sense of overwhelm, or is it something that the police do really well in training their staff on managing that?
I think it's more of a personal approach. We all step out of the academy at this, with the same training, the same skills, the same qualification, and people react differently to the situation. And I still remember that first day. The first day out of the academy as a probationary constable. It's a totally foreign environment. You're working with a completely different group of people, and this is where it gets real. You're now there to do the job. It's not training. There's no safety net. There's no just reset the assessment. You're doing it, and it does. I'd challenge anyone to say they wouldn't be confronted by that that scenario where it's time to step up. Yeah, and it doesn't take long for that to dissipate either. Once you're involved in those operational activities and you think, well, the training has prepared me for this, and the people I'm working with are there to support me, then you become more confident and you start to take those steps. So as you move through, that sense of trepidation or imposter syndrome, that's a real thing. I remember my first appointment as an assistant commissioner, so first occasion that I've been appointed into the executive, I was probably sitting there thinking, why me? What have I? How do I do this job? But you've got to sort of, in some respects, you've got to jump in, back yourself and take those first steps. Know you're going to make mistakes, but be prepared to learn from them.
Imposter syndrome is something that is very prevalent in the world, and this is a business podcast, so especially in business, and I suffer from it on a daily basis. I get asked to speak and host events and whatnot, and every single time, like, out of everyone in the world, you've chosen me. It doesn't make sense.
I've lived that experience, and probably never more so than as the Commissioner of Police. I'm I'm just Grant Stevens.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I do okay in the policing context, but I still have to, I challenge the decision making that saw someone appoint me as the Commissioner of Police.
Yeah.
So,
It's like, what were you
I love my
thinking?
job and I think I'm doing okay,
Yeah.
but imposter syndrome's a real thing, and you got to move past that. And you do have to back yourself, and that takes a bit of courage sometimes. And I do remember, as the Deputy Commissioner, I spent a lot of time talking to the Commissioner, Gary Burns, about some of the strategic challenges we had, some of the operational issues, some of the difficulties that we as an organisation were dealing with, some of the government decisions, policy things that we had to implement. And I'd give my advice, and we'd have some pretty decent conversations. And at the end of that conversation, I'd turn around and walk out of his office, and I left the decision with him. And it was only when I sat in that chair as my chair, and even relieving doesn't give you the same sense of trepidation. But once you own the job and it's yours, that's when you realise the significance of the decisions that you have to make. And it doesn't matter how much advice you get from people, you're still accountable for the decision.
Yeah.
So
I think there's conversations I have with CEOs on a daily basis is that exact experience. As you sit there, you want someone to turn to. I think this is why they invented boards and all the above. It's just, I need someone to turn to.
Yeah.
I actually need someone that I can just seek advice of, and the importance of mentors and coaches and all that come into play.
Yeah. Now, so I thought I knew the full extent of the role of Commissioner of Police because of my close relationship with the previous Commissioner. But it's only when you take ownership of the job that you truly understand the complexities and the challenges that go with the role.
That come with it, yeah. Still sort of progressing up the ladder in your career. So hence, we're going to drop back slightly a bit again. I want to ask you, and you actually told me not to ask you this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I'm going to ask you about the Penske files.
I'm going to take the fifth.
When we caught up a couple of weeks ago, we talked about your approach and how that your car was, you were the first person at work every single day and you were the last person to leave every single day. How true is that?
Oh, that may have been the perception. And I didn't do it deliberately to deceive people that I was there first and out last. I decided in order to try and maintain a level of fitness that I would ride my bike to and from work.
Yeah.
But because I needed my uniform and other stuff, I'd drive in on a Monday, park my car in the car park with my bike in the back of the car, and then ride to and from and then drive home on Friday night.
Yeah.
And it created this perception amongst some of my peers that I was burning the candle at both ends. And I chose not to correct their perception.
I love it. And was it true that your boss came up to you and said,
He said, "What's going on?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Your car's here all the time." And I said, "Well, Gary, we do what we do." So I didn't lie to him.
No, you didn't.
But he figured it out pretty quickly.
Oh, the walking around with a piece of paper, all the above would have come into play. That's hilarious. You didn't sleep under the desk at any point, though.
No, the desk was never big enough to sleep under.
For those who don't know, we are referring a lot to Seinfeld.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
is an episode where George was pretending to be busy, hence the Penske files. Look,
I've never pretended to be busy.
No, that's right. You're always busy.
Yeah.
Correct, as you would be in your role. Look, as part of the police training, communication would be seriously one of the greatest weapons that you have in your repertoire.
Absolutely,
when walking out into society.
That's the first thing we expect police officers to use before they start thinking about other tactical options. Communication is a key part of being a police officer, and it's not just about confronting situations, but it's about getting information from witnesses and victims. You have to be empathetic. You have to be able to listen. Good communication is an absolute essential for a good police officer.
I'm obviously have the right to assume that that's what is highly taught in those trainings, right? Where you say,
Yep.
I'm going to rely on my training. Can you talk to us about the art of communication and what you are taught in your career as an early police officer, and how that might apply to those in business and dealing with conflict, dealing with tough situations, dealing with influence, all that sort of stuff?
I think our focus on communication now is, as in terms of what we provide for our recruits, is probably far more sophisticated than what we had when I went through the academy. That was a long time ago, and the training was probably consistent with the times in terms of the level of complexity that went with policing. But it's built into all of our leadership programs, detective training. Every opportunity we get to bring people in as a group for development, then a part of that will be communication, and it's particularly relevant to certain parts of the work we do, and detectives are a really good example of that. It's, the fundamental skill that detectives have is the ability to talk to people and listen and synthesise information and make the most of it. And you get into our leadership development, and communication is a really important part.
It would be. Have you ever read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference?
No.
So it's a really great book, and I recommend it to anyone listening. It is, Chris Voss was a detective and what do they call it? Is it when someone's held ransom or something like that? It was a negotiator. Hostage negotiator, that's all right. So he's written a book on all the techniques that they were taught in those situations and how to debunk a situation, I guess, if that's the right word. You love your job, and you've done some amazing things. You've worked across many different departments, and including HR, which I want to touch on in a sec. But you said, and I've heard you say previously, that one of the most proud moments in your career was the discovery of some of the sex crimes against children and putting these bad guys away. On that topic, you would have seen some pretty horrific things in your time that wouldn't sit with your value set. How do you compartmentalise?
That's actually a tough question to answer. I'm not sure how you do. Once again, sort of going back to my time as a trainee and a junior officer and a detective, we were far less sophisticated in terms of the support we provided as an organisation to our people, and a lot of it was relying on your own coping mechanisms to deal with some of the stuff that you had to experience. But I don't think there'd be a single police officer out there that hasn't had dozens of traumatic experiences that they've had to deal with. The average person, might have one or two significant incidents in their life that really has the potential to traumatise them, but police officers are dealing with it almost on a daily basis. Dozens and dozens of occasions when the potential for their harm to their own psychological well-being is there. A lot of it is about personal resilience, I think, but organisationally we're far more tuned into that now, and we're educating our people to recognise when they're not travelling well, what support networks are available to them, and encouraging people to take advantage of those support mechanisms. Not an easy thing, because there is still a stigma attached to mental health issues. And if you're struggling with the nature of the work, it's not an easy thing to put your hand up. I recognise that. I wish it wasn't the case, because you can't rely on personal resilience. We're all wired differently, and we can all deal with a whole heap of stuff, but you never know what is going to be the thing that triggers a reaction that puts you under stress. That's the nature of policing. And I've seen a lot of things that float back through my head at different times, and child sexual abuse is one of those. Child exploitation images. I absolutely take my hat off to people who dedicate their professional life to investigating child sexual abuse. I've seen a lot of stuff, and some pretty horrific stuff, but the stuff that seems to impact me most is child sexual abuse.
My wife worked in child protection, and I never forget the first week She worked in child protection. She came home and there was a case where literally that week a child had passed away. And she didn't go into all the details, but she told me roughly the scenario. And I remember thinking at that point, I love my bubble. I actually don't want to know about what you are going to see. And I think we made a decision as a family at that point. It's like, you can't bring that stuff home.
Yeah.
You cannot. I cannot hear it because it actually affects me. Social media these days is pretty. If you go on Twitter or Reddit or any of these, you can look up anything and see videos of what happens out in the streets. And I've seen some of these videos, and I cannot get those images out of my head watching it on a screen, let alone someone talking to me about it. When you talk about mental health, how do you manage a workforce that is seeing these traumatic things on a daily basis?
Well, that's it. We invest heavily into the well-being of our people. But despite the amount of money we invest, I could probably double it and spend it wisely.
Yeah.
So we, from the very beginning, even in terms of our selection processes for people that we are looking to recruit, we're doing the psychometric testing to make get some indication of their ability to deal with traumatic situations, personal resilience, stress management, because we have a pretty good understanding of the sorts of things they're going to be exposed to once they get out from the academy. So it starts as early as that, and then it's about a constant application of those wellbeing principles and providing access to the right supports. It's something we are deeply concerned about, and like I said, we just don't want to leave people to rely on their own resources or their own personal resilience to get through this stuff. We need them to do the job they do, and we need to make sure they're capable of doing it day in, day out.
And I think the day in, day out bit is the part that how do you show up every day at work, switching on? Like, is there an on and off switch that you have?
Look, yes, there should be.
Yeah.
But if I think personally, I'm not sure about the on off switch. I don't think I ever switch off, particularly in these senior roles. It is a constant thing. You don't hang your hat up as you're walking out of the office at 5 o'clock as the commissioner and not think about it till 8 o'clock the next morning. Phone's always ringing. Even when the phone's not ringing, you're thinking about things because there's a lot of complexity in the size of the business we are. And so I don't think there is a genuine on-off switch. And if you love what you do, it's hard to switch off. Yeah. And if you are motivated by what you do as well, it's just not that black and white.
Yeah, no, it's not.
If you're in a job you don't enjoy, or it's relatively straightforward, or very process oriented, maybe that's the case. But when you're talking about complex, dynamic, fast moving situations, stressful situations, then you never really switch off, I don't think. And in my context, and I'm sure I can speak for a lot of police officers, once you've been in for a while, being a police officer becomes part of who you are. There's a sense of pride that goes with that. Yeah. But it really changes how you see yourself and how other people see you. So, you're talking about friends asking you about the job. There's not too many social functions police officers go to where someone doesn't come up to them and talk about the job. Yeah. So even in that social context, if you have switched off, there's probably someone flicking the switch back on.
I had a wedding on Saturday on the weekend, just passed, and there was a police officer sitting across the table from me, his friend, I won't mention names, but talking about decom and all the above, and I was just like, I don't know how you do that. I do not know how. Because I think about my position as a CEO, leader of a business, and there might be a legal thing, or there might be a conversation with a client that didn't go well, or we lost a job or a big tender that we put forward, and the disappointment that I take home sometimes. My wife can read it on my face the moment I walk through the door. My kids can sense that, Dad just needs it, probably just to go for a run or something and clear his mind before he gets into family life. Is that how do you? I think my question is, those thoughts, they don't leave. What you've seen, they don't leave. Whereas, pushing aside a legal thing or pushing aside a lost job, that's minor compared to what you've seen and what you're going through. How do you prepare when you do go home at night?
Well, the sorts of stuff we're talking about that police officers deal with every day is not really part of my day anymore.
Yeah.
I get briefings on a lot of stuff, and I'm still exposed to some pretty graphic material that relate to child sexual abuse or murders, other crimes that my people are investigating. But and from a personal point of view, I seem to have that ability to compartmentalise things. From the complexities around my job though, and some of the the budget challenges or the strategic issues we're dealing with, or issues that potentially impact on the reputation of the organisation, they come home with me. And one of my problems is I live about 7 kilometres from home, and quite often if I get a good run in traffic, I get home before I've really compartmentalised that stuff, and I'll walk through the back door and I'll get told to walk out and come back in again because I've brought that crap home with me. So,
Well, it's great that your wife has and your family have the self-awareness or the awareness to know that.
I'm not sure if it's awareness or intolerance.
That's probably the latter.
Healthy intolerance.
Right.
She's turn around, go out, come in again and see how you go.
Let's restart.
Yeah.
And I know you're not exposed to it, right? But you hear about the stories that happen, especially within the walls of South Australia, the boundaries of South Australia and Adelaide particularly is what I'm talking about now. And you let your kids walk around outside knowing that there are some of these type of people out in the world. How do you manage that situation?
Look, and I'm not just saying this because it serves my interests as the Commissioner of Police to say it, but South Australia is one of the safest places in the world. And this is part of the problem of social media. There are positives and negatives to social media, but one of the negatives is that you have this, I think, an excessive exposure to the bad things that happen and the crime, the assaults, the sexual assaults, the abductions, all of these things that are happening globally are delivered to your device, and you're looking at it almost every day. It used to be your perception of crime or safety was based on what was on the 6 o'clock news or in the Advertiser. We are far more exposed now, which alters our sense of safety and our perception about the safety of our children. That's not to say you should be reckless with what you let your children do, but we're in a very safe place, and we don't want to be sort of creating a generation of children who haven't had the opportunity to make mistakes and sort of experience life because we're overly protective. It's about balance, and we're in a great place to be able to let our children take some of those risks.
I remember growing up, I lived at Grange here in South Australia. I live in Henley now, so I've stayed local. One of those typical South Australians that has only moved a stone's throw away. And we had through Grange, there's a beautiful creek that runs, and I remember going out as a kid, probably 10, 11 years old, getting on the bike. I had my good mate across the road, Matt, his name was, and we used to get on the bike and ride down this creek. And our aim was to get lost. Like that was it.
Yeah.
Let's just disassociate ourselves with the complete reality of where we are and try to figure out how to get home from there and see if we're good enough. Our mental compass can get us home. I would never let my children do that.
No. But your children are more connected to you than you ever were with your parents when you're out and about. Like, I remember I was still in primary school, living in Kensington near the parade and Portrush Road, riding my bike with a mate to the Gums, which was up off Glenburn Road. Yeah.
I don't think I would have let my kids do that.
No.
But even if I did, they've probably got a mobile phone in their back pocket that if they get into strife, they can ring me or the police. So it's about, I do think you need to find that sweet spot where the kids can go out and have those sorts of experiences. Do you think it's warranted though? Like I would go out at 9 a.m. and not come home till dark. Like we were just out all day, and we'd take a couple of dollars with us and scrap some lunch on the way through, and then at night time we'd come home and we'd know 5:30 dinner was going to be on the table, sort of thing. And what's really, maybe I should ask my parents this, but the fact of the child, they don't know where the child is all day and not having a worry about it. Like, my daughters have a watch now. It's called the Space Talk watch. It's a great company here in South Australia that have developed a watch where it's got it's a phone where you can call and it's got the GPS tracker in it, so you can see But even with that watch on, I still wouldn't let them go out. Do you think it's warranted, my way of thinking, or?
I think you need to take steps to ensure your children are safe. But you can't be looking over their shoulder all the time. Like my youngest son got into mountain biking, and as a probably year 7, year 8, year 9, he was catching the train up to the top of Belair with his mates, and they'd disappear in the morning and come back in the afternoon. He had a mobile phone, so I knew I could get in touch with him. But it's about. Yeah, you just maintain some perspective and remember that you're exposed to far more information now that influences and colours your thinking that probably doesn't necessarily sit with reality.
Doesn't equate to reality.
We're all pretty safe in South Australia, but that doesn't mean bad things won't happen.
Correct.
So,
and I think I don't want you to say, send your kids out, right? Like that's not but you mentioned South Australia is the safest place. As a parent, can I feel comfortable if we do tick all the right boxes that my kids can go out?
Well, it's another dimension to this is the child you're talking about.
Well, that's true.
How confident they are. How resilient they are.
Yeah.
The friendship group they're hanging around with. Your understanding of exactly what they're going to do when they're out and about. This is a decision parents have to make for themselves. But fear of being kidnapped. That's an extreme, you need to find some perspective. I think.
It's not often that you hear cases like that. I mean, not that you can talk to it, but it's not like it's happening every single day.
No, of course not. And, you talk about what happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You think about some of the most horrific offending that's been committed against children happened in organisations that were established to provide services to children. And, the framework we have in place now that strictly vets people who are involved in providing services and activities for kids, should give us a level of comfort. If your children should be able to go down the street on their bikes. And does it make any difference if they're 100 metres or 400 metres or 500 metres? Proper parental control needs to find that balance, and it's an individual decision for each family as to what the children can do.
I think you're right in regards to the kid. You should be more worried about a car hitting your kid than anything else. Yeah. Digressed a little bit. Let's move back to the career of Grant, and you did lead the human resources team at one point, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I got called into the commissioner's office. There was a rotation of assistant commissioners, and I was thoroughly enjoying the portfolio I had, and he called me in and told me that he was moving me to HR. And I thanked him for it. Went home and had a little cry.
I work in the world of HR.
Yeah, well, it's my own fault because my tertiary studies were in human resource development.
Yeah, okay. So you had an interest in it.
I think I fell into that in terms of my tertiary studies. I did management with HR development.
Okay.
And
was that something that you chose or something that you were told to do?
No, I chose that.
Yeah, okay.
I chose that. It's just never really thought it would sort of box me into a corner, but I wasn't thrilled about going to HR. But over the time I was there, I really got into it and enjoyed it, and saw a side of the business that I really hadn't been deeply involved in, other than a user of the HR services as a manager. And on reflection, I can say with a lot of confidence that opportunity I didn't see it as an opportunity at the time, but that opportunity was probably quite pivotal in me becoming the Deputy Commissioner and then ultimately the Commissioner of Police. Yeah, understanding a deeper understanding of all aspects of the business. So
it's the human part, isn't it? HR, human resources.
Yeah, but there's a lot of administration.
There is.
Yeah, and that's the side that sort of would be the detractor, I suppose, to anyone thinking about where they might want to be.
But it helps you see the forest from the trees, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's our budget in SAPOL is over $1 billion. I think it's about 1.3 billion. I reckon about 82% of that is salaries. Yeah. So, the core of our business is people. Yeah. So managing our people and looking after our people, that is, that's priority number one.
And I think it would have given you a really good indication of the culture of police at the time.
I think you have a pretty good indication of the culture as a result of your exposure to different aspects of policing and just being a part of the organisation. The time in HR, and I'm not making it sound like it was a long time, it was about 12 months.
Yep.
But you understand how the culture has to be managed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sort of understand that as a manager anyway, but when you're in that human resource environment,
you're thrust into it. Then,
it's part of your portfolio responsibility.
Now, I have to say this, culture is not the responsibility of HR, right? It's the responsibility of the organisation and the leaders that fall within the organisation and everyone that plays a part.
Absolutely.
So let's actually clarify that. It's not a role of HR.
No, but we've just changed, just a few months ago, we changed the title of Human Resources Service to People, Culture and Wellbeing.
Great.
So you have to have one of your executive team need to have portfolio responsibility for culture. It's not their job to manage culture, but there's a whole heap of material that needs to sit formally defining the culture, the ethics, the values of the organisation, and that's got to be monitored, oversight, and that's where the culture piece comes in. Yep. The culture is the responsibility of every single person in the organisation, and without everyone committed to a positive culture, then you start to see bad things emerging.
I love it. Music to my ears. We'll cut that up and use that as a promo. Because we work a lot in culture. Synergy IQ, we're an organisation that manages complex change, and you can imagine culture
absolutely
really falls in part of that. The workforce planning is really, and we'll get into that with the policing world shortly. You have a civilian in the head of people and culture role now. Is that deliberate?
Yes, it is. We've had civilians in the past, and I think it was a period of about almost 20 years where we've had assistant commissioners as the head of human resources, and we have civilian HR professionals within the structure. We took the view just a couple of years ago that we have a director of IT and communications who is a professional from that field. Our director of business is a civilian who manages our finances, fleet, facilities. Why wouldn't we apply the same principle to human resources and recruit an HR professional to lead that part of our business? And that's what we've done. So it's working really well. We've got senior police that support our director, but to me, it's a common sense decision.
Yeah.
People invest heavily to develop their skill set in a professional field, and we've had reasonably good success with assistant commissioners running that area, but it's a massive learning curve for a generalist police officer who's moved into the executive to step into that HR role and get up to speed, because if I'm doing the right thing by my assistant commissioners, I'm going to give them a diversity of roles over the course of their executive career, so that if they choose to compete for the commissioner's position or the deputies, they've got a broad skill set. Whereas they will expect to be moved, which means you've got this lead-in time where they're learning their craft, and just as they're probably getting to understand the environment, they're probably time to move on. Whereas our people, culture and wellbeing director, she's in that role, and that's her skill set. She virtually hits the ground running, and we get a lot of benefit from that.
She's brilliant. She was instrumental in organising this chat between us too. By the way.
She must be brilliant.
Well, shout out to Kim Sheree.
Kim's doing a great job, and it was a big move for us to move from an assistant commissioner to a director. I didn't think it was a big step. I thought it was a sensible step, and Kim's really stepped into the role and embraced it. And she's got some serious challenges in terms of where policing sits at the moment, from recruiting, training, development, and also that welfare piece as well, wellbeing. But that's the benefit of having someone who comes from that environment. They come with a whole toolkit ready to go.
Absolutely. Do you believe your role as Commissioner of Police, your main role, is to build a high-performing culture?
I wouldn't say it's the main role, and I say that because I would find it difficult to split off the various obligations I have and pick one over the others. But it is up there, like in terms of priorities. Strong and positive culture is a critical priority for this role. Yeah, and it's fundamental to what we do.
Is it where you want it to be?
I'm really proud of the culture of the South Australia Police. I think we are successful in delivering a policing service to South Australia. I think we are instrumental in South Australia thriving because we provide a safe community. And I think we have an exceptional team of people, albeit over 6,000 people, who demonstrate all the positive aspects of our culture. Having said that, I don't think you can afford to rest on your laurels and think that without constant monitoring and maintenance that your culture is going to stay as a positive one. You have to be directing it and guiding it. And there are occasions when you have to intervene heavily when you identify aspects of your culture that are negative or counterproductive. We had a situation where we became aware of aspects of our culture that needed to change, and that was around sexual harassment and discrimination. And we've been working quite aggressively since about 2016 to ensure that aspect of our culture is where we want it to be.
I mean, it's going to play a really big part in attracting the right talent.
Absolutely. We historically, policing has been seen as a male-dominated industry, profession, and we've been working to encourage women to join policing as a career.
I think you used the example when we spoke last that if you close your eyes and think about a South Australian police officer, what do you see? And I mean, you see a white male, don't you?
Yes, you do. That's the reality is, and this is not unique to policing. If you think about a nurse, you probably think of a woman. A teacher, you probably think of a woman.
Yeah.
Fire officer, you think of a male. Yeah. Police officer, your mind's eye or mental picture is a male, and we need to change that. But it doesn't change overnight. And part of that is making sure we are an organisation that will attract women and ethnic minorities. In order to make sure we are that organisation, you need to look at your culture to make sure your culture reflects those expectations that people will have coming in.
Well, you got to set these people up for success, right? And
Absolutely.
And they want to join a place where they're welcome, they're accepted, and have to put up with the bullshit of sexual harassment.
Well, you need to come to work knowing that you're going to be safe, respected, and valued.
Absolutely.
And 3 basic principles that everyone should expect. And that's where we needed to do some work to make sure that when we start to recruit women, we're going to be able to retain them because the organisation includes them.
Yep. Have a drink if you want.
Thanks.
So, in saying that, there's a question here of you're trying to attract female. Is it a 50-50 split that you're after, or how does it look?
In 2016, we started a program, or an initiative where all of our recruit courses have to be 50-50 gender split. It's been some hard yards in terms of acceptance of that policy within South Australia Police and also within the community, the perception that good men are missing out on jobs in policing. It's not true, but that was a perception that we had to deal with. And also a perception that we must be lowering our standards if we're getting more women in, which is also a fallacy. Anyone who gets into the police academy has met our standards and are the right people to be there. It is the fact, though, that if you may be suitable as a male applicant, but because of our endeavour to make it 50-50, you might have to wait till the next course starts. Okay. So no one misses out. If they're good enough to be a South Australian police officer, we want them. We actually need them. Mm-hmm. And the first priority is to make sure we have enough police fulfilling their obligations in South Australia. The second, and equally as important, is that it's a 50-50 gender split.
One thing that's going through my mind and is the conversation we had before about the sense of overwhelm and getting thrusted into a world where you're feeling uncomfortable. Now, I can walk down the street and see a group of young guys stand on the side of the road, dressed in what I wouldn't call suit attire, and feel threatened. Mm. And I'm a big 6'2", 100+ kilo guy, and I feel threatened. From a female perspective, is that something that's holding them back and holding your numbers back?
That's probably a question for some of the women we have working in policing, and I have to say, from my observation, is they accept that challenge and that responsibility just as well as men do.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
Yeah, and I think it's this is where communication becomes essential in terms of your ability to perform well as a police officer. Is communication will contribute or will assist in avoiding confrontation.
Yeah, which is probably a skill set that females are better at.
Yeah,
is communication.
Yeah, I think we can acknowledge that. Yeah. That you put a male into a hostile situation, then communication probably is going to
break down.
Well, it'll break down more quickly because of the nature of who men are, whereas women are more likely to pursue that communication approach more successfully.
So while we're on the topic of attracting talent, Gen Zs, millennials, it's a different world out there at the moment.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're seeing?
Well, we're from a recruiting point of view, we're starting to think about how we position ourselves as an organisation that will be an attractive proposition to these younger generations. Yeah. We're getting past the point where there are some challenges inherently in the fact that whether or not policing can provide what people are expecting from a professional career now. People who have grown up on devices coming into a learning environment where the first thing we give them is a big thick book to read, full of all of the processes that they have to get through, that we're using technology that might not be cutting edge.
Yeah. You just got to open a YouTube account and get them on there. You'll get them watching, don't worry.
And then we got the challenge of the level of flexibility that people expect from their employment. We're still sort of paramilitary.
Yeah.
We wear uniforms. We have hierarchies. We expect our people to do what they're told when they're told, because that's how we manage critical incidents and emergency situations, and it's how we do it safely. We have shift working rosters that need to be filled. We don't have the opportunity to provide that level of flexibility that a lot of younger generations expect from work now. So we need to be thinking about how we reconfigure policing to accommodate those requirements of the people that we're attracting, but also maintain that level of service that the community requires of us. Big challenges.
Yeah, it would be, because there's a shift in thinking now, isn't there? There's so many different ways that you can earn some cash, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're making YouTube or you're an influencer, or like these things didn't happen when you were growing up. And I think one of the things that sort of stuck out for me for me as a civilian thinking about the police force. You don't call it police force, do you?
Police service.
Police service, yeah. I just thought about that as the police service. The idea of who you would likely attract like the cohort of who you would likely attract would be quite smaller, right? So if you think, and I'm going to use the example of America because it's like 300 million people and there's so many different levels of society that fall within it. If you're from a low socioeconomic society, you can go to the army and you can learn discipline and all the above, and your community doesn't have a thought process of the army in the way that community might think about police, right? There's a different viewpoint. Do you find the same struggles here?
I probably haven't turned my mind to that dimension. I'm really focused on the challenges we have in recruiting people into policing now. This is not about emerging generations or new generations entering the workforce. This is about our current pool of potential applicants. That every jurisdiction in Australia is struggling to recruit police. So we're doing a huge amount of work to try and figure out what the causes of that are. COVID plays a part in that, I think. People's perceptions of what police do has probably shifted as a result of what they've seen police officers doing as part of the nation's COVID response. Not every police service did it the same way, and we saw some pretty ugly pictures coming out of other states in terms of how police were dealing with people who were, not following the COVID rules. That's probably had an impact nationally on how people see policing. And we're also at a point at the moment where we have almost full employment, so there's a lot of choice out there for people. And if I'm brutally honest, we don't have the most streamlined recruiting processes, so people probably get frustrated while they're waiting to hear back from us. So we're doing as much as we can internally to speed those processes up.
Lack of people, isn't it?
It is. We can do more with more people, but we need the people to come to us so we have more. So.
Is it recruitment from front line or is it recruitment from office staff? Is it all the above?
It's everything. If we have more police, we need more administration staff to support those police. So, but we are quite, and this comes back to Kim, our people, culture and wellbeing director, really turning our recruiting and selection processes on their head to make them as engaging as possible. So when someone shows interest, we basically, once we get our hooks in, we don't let them go because, not everyone who applies ends up getting through. So we need to make sure we attract the right people and then push them through as quickly as possible and get them into the environment so they start to become a part of who we are.
We have a formula here at Synergy IQ where it's EX equals CX, right? Which is employee experience equals customer experience. And I believe that on a note of from a recruitment point of view, the same thing can be said. If your employees are experiencing great things, they're telling people about come work with SAPOL. What is really interesting to me is if police as a service, police as an organisation can't recruit the amount of people that we need to manage as the population is growing, what happens?
Well, I think I've got a solution for that. And part of that lies in the fact that we have a traditional mindset about police numbers. And when we talk about increasing the size of the police service, from a government perspective, historically it's been about more police in uniform, and they'll make a commitment to funding additional police. We need to step out of that, and policing is becoming more complex. So we recruit people as general duties police officers, and over the course of their career they find themselves moving into different specialised fields. Some of those fields take a lot of time to develop the expertise, and we have the potential to bring people in laterally who already have those skills, and I think cybercrime is a really good example of that. Your general duties police officer might have an interest in that, but for us to get them up to a level where they have the skills and qualifications to be effective in a cyber environment might take years, whereas we can attract someone who's done tertiary studies in that, maybe even practiced in the field, to come in laterally and start operating immediately. So it's about diversifying our workforce, having the right people doing the right things. And there are some things that must be done by a police officer, but there's a range of other duties that we have police officers doing that we could reconfigure to bring people in laterally who don't necessarily have to have gone through the academy, learned how to drive police cars, use firearms, tactical options.
Well, this is workforce planning and thinking about strategically. I think we work with a lot of companies, and if you think engineering, I'll use an example of an engineering company that we have worked with, is that the engineers are hard to come by, and in the defence world, they're almost inbred in a way where they go from one company to another company to another company and back, and whoever's paying the most. And so we have to think about, and through COVID times, we haven't been able to recruit externally or from internationally as well. So there's a lack of people coming in from overseas. So we think about if we've got 3 engineers all with sort of 30% administration in their role, so how do we take the administration off them and give that to an administration officer, and then that gives them full capacity, and all of a sudden we might get more engineering productivity. It's just about thinking about things slightly differently.
We've historically in South Australia, police officers have done the prosecuting for matters in the magistrates court, and we've had a team of police prosecutors made up of police officers who have done the training and development to move into that courtroom environment. And we were finding it more and more challenging to find police officers who wanted to move into that space because the magistrates court has become more complex in the matters it's dealing with. We took the step of recruiting and employing civilian solicitors who are now police solicitors, and they make up about 30% of our prosecutor workforce now. So they're appearing in court prosecuting matters for police instead of police officers, which means we can push more police onto the front line. And that's it's a great model. It's working really well for us, and over time we would expect that we'll see more police solicitors than police officers in that environment. And it works.
And people are doing what they love, right? They're doing.
And we've got to get past this mindset that we've had historically in police, that you join police as a young person, and that's it. This is your career now. We will have you until you retire.
Yeah.
We need to move past that. That even with police officers, we should expect that this might not be their final employer. They might diversify and do something differently. They may come back to us, they may not. The same with our civilians that we recruit, whether it be cybercrime, prosecutors, whatever other field we can find. We might not have them forever, but they'll leave. I'm hoping they'll leave us with more experience for their own personal development and have left us in better shape than what they arrived.
Brilliant. I love it. Level 5 leadership. Have you heard of that? It's a good to great book by Jim Collins.
No.
It's a level 5 leadership. Where a level 5 leader is thinking about how they can grow the people within their team to go off and create careers for themselves elsewhere other than where they are. It's not about how do we keep and control. It's about how do we grow and train so that they can have an impact on the world in other ways. So I think it's really great to hear that you guys are doing that. Is it a good job? Is it policing? Is it a good
job? I can't say I've loved every minute of my career, but I don't have a lot of bad days that sort of drag me down.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed. If everybody has a career like I've had in terms of enjoyment, then I think we're pretty lucky. Like I've loved every minute of it, and I talk to police officers all the time, notwithstanding some of the challenges that they face, some of the hardships, some of the frustrations, a lot of the demands. They still love coming to work. Yeah. So it is a good job. It's a good organisation. I'm really proud of our reputation within the South Australian community, and our reputation comes from the way our people do our job. The organisation itself, I don't think has a reputation of integrity. The people who work for us have integrity, and the way they do their job positively impacts on our reputation, and that's what we enjoy as an organisation.
Correct. Goes with any organisation there, right?
That's right. It's about your people and how they do their job.
100% about your people. Talking about loving your job, you rose to a bit of fame over the past couple of years, going through the COVID years now, as we look back. To be very honest with you, I didn't know who any other commissioner was in South Australia before you. It wasn't something that was front of mind, and all of a sudden Grant Stevens is on the TV every single day. You have you have received some upshift of level of interest in you and since being, and how have you taken that on board? And because you have this humble approach of, I'm just regular old bike riding Grant Stevens. I don't know about this fame and fortune, not fortune, but the fame that I'm sort of receiving at the moment.
I suppose the fortune doesn't.
Yeah, fortune.
The role of commissioner comes with some profile. There's a lot of expectations about,
no doubt,
being available for media and talking about current issues. But that sort of once we hit COVID, that was on steroids. It was just it was every day.
It was.
And it's not just that it was there every day, but people's intense interest in what we were talking about, drew so many people into watching these broadcasts or seeing it on, social media feeds.
Yeah.
It was quite different, and the consequence of that was wherever I would go, I'd be confronted in the community, whether I'm at the supermarket in a pair of jeans and a T-shirt, or in any sort of formal capacity. But invariably, people were really nice. They were coming up and thanking me and SAPOL for what we were doing around COVID, and the vast majority of people were really, really good. So it took a little bit to reconcile that being recognised so obviously was different.
I have a little bit of I don't know if you call it post-traumatic stress. We're seeing you, Nicola Spurrier and Stephen Marshall on the TV every day for how long? It was 16. Like, you guys were on TV every day consistently.
Through 2020, it was pretty intense, and parts of 2021.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, if it got to the point where they started swapping people in and out who was doing the press interviews, but if you three were on TV, something serious was about to be said. How did you manage that relationship with the two? It seemed like, from a public point of view, things were a little bit argy-bargy here and there, and there was a bit of differencing of opinions. And
No, it's for context, as the state coordinator, I was the decision maker in terms of what rules we put in place or what we removed in terms of restrictions. I was supported by the Premier, who did an excellent job in enabling me to do my job, and I was advised by Nicola Spurrier. And Nicola's responsibility was to provide the best advice as it related to managing COVID-19 in the community, and my obligation was to take a broader view in terms of the impact of the restrictions we were putting in place, the likelihood of people complying with those restrictions, and how we'd manage non-compliance, and making sure that there weren't any unintended consequences that we should have foreseen. So by and large, it was an excellent working relationship. I've got nothing but respect for Nicola and former Premier Stephen Marshall, who, by the way, on being succeeded by Peter Malinauskas, he's been exactly the same in terms of his support of me as the state coordinator. But there were always occasions when we were going to be debating the merits of a decision, and it was done respectfully. We didn't always agree, but those discussions and deliberations positioned me to be able to make some of those difficult decisions. So,
do you always win?
No. It was not about winning.
No, I'm stirring. I'm throwing that in there.
I can't imagine it having been done any better had you shifted people in or out. Whichever person it was. I felt as difficult as some of the decisions were, and appreciating the consequences of those decisions. I felt well supported in terms of the advice from Nicola and other people in SA Health, and the support from the Premier. And a lot of the stuff we did was very unpalatable, and notwithstanding the challenges that we were creating, I was still supported.
let me tell you, I was sitting there at home or wherever I was watching you guys on TV thinking, I wouldn't want to be in their position right now. I absolutely empathise with it. It's unprecedented. It's something that we've never done before or never gone through before. You're making things up with the information that you have at hand, right? That's all you can do. So, kudos to the role and to what you guys did. But you talked before about unforeseen consequences and the idea of lockdowns, and having been worked in sex crimes and all, child abuse and all that sort of stuff. Was that an unforeseen? I think one thing we often heard was that, the domestic abuse was on the rise as a result and all the above. Is that, can you squash that fact, or was it actually?
No.
Actually
what I can say is in South Australia, I think we had a total of about 7 days of lockdown.
Yeah.
In contrast to almost every other state or territory in Australia. Where they had weeks or months. Victoria is obviously the outlier. It was just massive.
Unbelievable.
So, that notion that people were more likely to be the victim of domestic violence or sexual abuse in a home environment because people were confined together, I don't think sits in South Australia. I don't think that could be applied. But we did have the situation where people were being forced to or opting to work from home, which meant we did have situations where people didn't have the same level of freedom to get out of the home environment. So there's a potential that might have resulted in people being subject to behaviours that they might not ordinarily have had to tolerate.
So how do you decide what's more important at that point?
Well, there's and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Now, no one was ever prevented from getting out of their home. They were never prevented from calling police.
Yeah, correct.
So these are the things you think, well, we can mitigate that.
Yeah, well, it's not like we're saying you have to stay there, and even if you're in danger, you stay put.
That's right. Yeah, and one of the key things we said when we shut our borders, people couldn't come into South Australia. One of the exemptions was if you're escaping domestic violence, you can come in.
You can come in. Yeah.
So we thought about those things, but you can't eliminate risk. And I'm sure there are people who experienced incidents of domestic abuse as a result of the fact that the COVID circumstances put them with the person committing those offences more frequently or for extended periods of time. But we didn't see significant changes in the reports of domestic abuse. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. People might not have reported it, but it's a really good example of trying to find that balance between addressing COVID but having an assessment or an understanding of what the possible consequences were. And, shutting down hospitality, knowing that a lot of them are small businesses and, business owners are basically being told you can't run your business. We are cutting off your livelihood. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't retain your staff. You think about the impact on individuals from that point of view, or hospitality workers who they're in a casual environment, work environment, no longer they don't have an income for food. The federal government did a great thing in supporting that, but imagine the stress from that.
So that was going to be the follow-up question. Domestic violence is one thing. Was suicide something else that was on your mind?
More broadly, mental health.
Yeah, mental health.
Suicide is one part of
that's the extreme measure.
It's an extreme, but there are a lot of people who are probably feeling the adverse effects of decisions that were forced upon them from COVID-19, and it may take years for them to recover from that.
What's a bigger pandemic, looking back in hindsight, mental health pandemic that this COVID's caused, or the actual...
I think much smarter people than me will do the analysis of the decisions that were made for COVID, how it impacted on the management of COVID, and what the consequential impacts of those decisions were on a range of other factors. And it's work that should be done. I think there needs to be a clear appreciation of how we manage COVID and how it impacted on people more broadly. Yeah.
In case it ever happens again, you're right. We have to look at these statistics and going, well, we're actually very lucky here in Australia, especially South Australia. Like from a loss of life point of view, we're very, very lucky compared to some of the other countries. How early in the piece?
And one thing on that too is it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
You couldn't ignore COVID because that would have had a devastating impact on our community as well.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, it's never black and white, isn't it? It's just like the switch button. It's never black and white. Never turn off and on. How early in the COVID point did you? I know I'm using this question because I think it's a point where, you as commissioner, you need to keep some stuff to yourself, right? You can't, you have confidentialities that you need to hold on to. How early in the piece did you go home and tell your wife that, oh, hang on, this COVID thing's actually coming and we're in a bit of trouble?
There wasn't a single point in time.
Yeah.
But, I spent a lot of time on the phone at home, so
she would have heard.
There were no surprises. But it was probably the turning point in terms of the impact on us as a family and me as commissioner and state coordinator was back in March. I'd gone to the police ball in Penola. I was invited to attend this ball as a charity fundraising event.
Yep.
So my wife and I went and we were driving back, and I spent most of the time on the trip back on the phone talking to people from the Department of Premier and Cabinet and the Chief Executive of SA Health about needing to start taking some very deliberate steps to manage COVID-19. And so I think that was a Sunday we were driving back. Over the course of the next week, it became pretty constant. And the very next Sunday is when I declared the major emergency, and that's when things really kicked off, and it became 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
What were you hearing in that time, and can you share it? What were you hearing about COVID at that time?
Well, this was at a point where we really didn't know what the impact of the virus was going to be. There was no likelihood at that early stage of a vaccine. So the whole plan was to the perception was that we're all going to get this thing. Yeah. If we all get it at once, then
we're in a bit of trouble.
We're in serious trouble.
Is it because what we were seeing was happening in Rome?
Yeah, Rome, New York.
Yeah.
People over the age of 60 being turned away from hospitals because they didn't have enough ventilators. They were being sent home to die. Mass graves being dug in Central Park. These things happen, and people forget that. But we were being briefed on, estimates in terms of the number of fatalities from COVID-19, the impact on our hospital system, the scarcity of our ICU resources and ventilators, the consequences of our hospital system being overwhelmed by a large number of people presenting all at once needing medical assistance because of COVID, the impact on other people who have other chronic illnesses, not being able to access those services. It was a fairly grim picture, and that's why we acted so quickly to try and put steps in place to slow down the spread of the virus through our community. We never intended to stop it. We just wanted to slow it down so our system could manage during those intensive periods.
Yeah. What was the slogan? Like
slow the spread.
Slow the spread, or the curve? What was the curve?
Yeah, we had a curve.
Spread the curve or something like that. Yeah. It was, how did you manage?
I'm having PTSD now talking about it.
It's not good, is it? And I think that it is so true. I didn't, when in our previous conversations, we said let's not spend too much time on it. But I think it's such an interesting thing now.
It is interesting
in hindsight.
And in all likelihood, I don't think anyone else will ever do what I did as the state coordinator. No. And there will be a review of the Emergency Management Act, which is the act that gave me those powers. And I fully support a review, but I think there is a view that after a certain period of time, it shouldn't sit on one person's shoulders to make those decisions. Yeah. Obviously, I'll contribute to that review and share my views then.
But I think it was a testament to you as a person. I think you were a calming influence on the TV. You really were, and I'm speaking as a civilian looking out, and as a business owner, as a father, as a husband. As someone as part of the community, whenever Grant Stevens spoke, and I'm not saying this just to blow smoke up your bum, but like it's more of it really is about. I remember you come on, and it was like, guys, this is actually something that we're doing, and we've made calculated decisions to the best of our ability. Like you just need to believe that this was to the best of our ability. There's no conspiracy stuff going on here. It's about how do we make sure we keep as many people safe in such a broad context as possible. You could see that was coming through you.
Don't know what to say to that.
No,
It's
put your hat on and tip your hat to it. So it was brilliant. I think what I am interested in is the leadership aspect of your role, and how did you prepare your organisation for this?
Well, we do a lot of exercise management, and we have the opportunity to practice our emergency management response through a whole range of different scenarios, including bushfires. We're well practiced in standing up the State Emergency Centre, pulling in key stakeholders, giving tasks to people that can support us, flooding events, severe weather events, statewide blackouts.
So you're pretty well versed in.
But this was different.
It was.
And I don't think the difference really struck us until we were in the midst of it. That this is far more significant. Never before have we introduced statewide restrictions. We might have shut down roads before, or set up an evacuation area for a particular township. But
this is on a whole new level.
This was completely different, and I don't think we were prepared for what we were going to be required to do as a police service, but the general management practices we have in place and the discipline that we apply positioned us to be able to adapt to this emerging event that we hadn't had a lot of experience in. So I'm, once again, I couldn't be more proud of the organisation and the people in it. And it's not just the people who got sent off to do COVID-related activities. It's every work group in the organisation, regardless of their role, stood up and adapted their work practices so we could maintain the broader level of service to the community. It's something that no matter what happens in the rest of my career and what happened before, the way South Australia Police responded to COVID-19 is something I'm incredibly proud of. Yeah, gave me the ability to do my job.
And so you should be. You as a leader, did you put much emphasis on that? Were you thinking about? I know in the heart of the moment, you're not necessarily relying on the thought. You're working on habit and you're working on experience and you're training.
Yeah.
But was there a conscious effort to say in that moment, I need to be the calming influence in this space? I actually need to play this part?
I'm not sure I'd describe it as a conscious thought, but it was clearly a part of my obligation was to not so much calm the community, but deliver the messages in a way that could be clearly understood, and people had an appreciation of what we were dealing with and what was required of them. And panic's never going to serve anyone. And I think being able to operate in complex or dynamic environments and maintain a level of calm assists everyone around you. It helps people focus. That sense of obligation in terms of providing leadership was not just outward facing for the community. It was about everyone within SAPOL too, and I put a lot of effort into speaking to as many of my staff as possible, visiting different work areas, visiting those locations that were involved in our COVID response, regular videos to the workforce about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we need them to do, how we need them to do it. How was really important. And I think we benefited from that approach.
It must have been an immense amount of pressure.
Yeah, well, on reflection, yes, but in the thick of it, it's day by day.
Just do what you got to do.
Yeah, you do.
How important was the hug from your kids when you got home?
My kids are of an age now where the hugs are few and far between.
But I think the question is more about who did you turn to just to go, how do I be human again?
I didn't have a problem with that. It was, the people I work with closely within SAPOL, a lot of them are friends, and I was supported by very competent people who were just as committed as me, and we were in this together. And my wife and my kids who are at home, they're hugely supportive as well. It's more organic than a deliberate thought about de-stressing or debriefing or getting that support. It just happened.
Has your daughter forgiven you? For context, the lockdown was done the day before your daughter's wedding, right? It was something like that.
It was
wasn't
a change of numbers.
That's right.
We reduced the numbers that could gather. I think we brought it down to 30.
Yeah.
It was just...
You just didn't want the extended relatives at the...
Well, I did try and encourage her to just get married at home in the backyard. But my daughter had a wedding scheduled for the 5th of December in 2020, and it was cancelled twice. And the second occasion we cancelled it, I actually hadn't told anyone that the numbers were coming down. And I was doing a radio interview and I announced that my daughter's wedding wasn't happening on the 5th of December. And my future son-in-law heard that and rang my daughter and said, "Did you realise our wedding's been cancelled?" So, that was fine. I think they saw the writing on the wall. But as it turned out, the numbers came up before the 5th of December and the venue was still available, so the wedding happened just as planned.
Oh, wow.
So,
there you go.
A few disappointments, but it happened as we would have hoped it to happen.
Yeah,
I didn't get to save any money.
No. That's why you were doing it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, only joking.
And my son had an 18th birthday in 2020 as well.
Okay. So there's a bit happening in the family.
Oh, at that point, you could only have 10 people at home, and his plan was for about 110 people. That was a bullet dodged. I did have 110 18-year-olds.
Couldn't christen himself on the 18th, like a clubbing event, do you know what I mean?
No, that's right.
So the night of the 18th birthday, you're going to a club.
Nightclubs, I don't think were operating at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Either.
Would have been heartbreaking. It would have been really hard.
He's forgiven me.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, it would have been, I always think about this year 11 and 12, especially the year 12 students going through that 2020 year.
It would have been very tough.
Looking back on that as a year of what was supposed to be one of their best years of their schooling career.
Yeah,
it's been really tough.
Yeah, the formals that didn't happen, or you had to choose between dancing or having alcohol. You couldn't have both. Weird times.
My daughter was starting year one, was going into year one, and typically every morning with my oldest daughter, we would take her into the classroom and talk to the teacher, and you'd build a great little community with the families and the mums and the dads and all the above. And I think that was one thing that we really missed with my second daughter is we're not really as connected with her friendship group and the parents as what we are with my oldest, who we had the opportunity. So there's a lot of loss there as well.
That's right. And some of those things are not immediately apparent. Yeah, they sort of become... You become aware of them over time.
Yeah.
So we'll be learning about the impact of COVID for a long time yet.
In hindsight, was everything done the way you would have done it? Like, would you have changed what you've done?
Well, that's a question I've been asked quite a few times coming out of the tail end of COVID. What would I have done differently? And if you take hindsight off the table, because it's really easy to come up with
it
a
skews
better way.
The vision, right? Yeah.
Yeah. In at the time of making those decisions, based on the advice we were getting and the forecasting that we had available to us, I'm comfortable with every decision we made. Hindsight will show us that some of those decisions could have been different, but you deal with what you know at the time you're making those decisions. And a really good example of that is Pizzagate. We had a lockdown because of the information we were provided about how COVID was being transmitted through what you'd call an incidental contact at a pizza shop. Yeah. And it was the right decision. If that information was accurate and correct, and we had no reason to disbelieve it at the time, we needed to act because there'd been a change in the behaviour of the virus that saw so many more people being affected. Yeah. We needed to slow things down. Hindsight tells us the circumstances were different. The lockdown wasn't required, but we didn't know that on the day of making the decision. We didn't know it was a 7-day lockdown. We found out after about 2 days, so it became a 3-day lockdown.
The amount of conspiracy theories that got thrown around about that pizza shop was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for the business.
Yeah, correct.
But these are the circumstances, and there are so many examples of difficult decisions made based on the information we had at our disposal.
Yeah. Conscious of your time, I'm going to start wrapping up now. I just want to ask one question before we jump into what we have is some quick fire questions at the end of this podcast. What does the future look like for Grant Stevens?
That's a really good question. It's a question I'm interested to see the answer to. I've never really had a deliberate plan to become the commissioner. I think I've probably said that.
Yep.
I've never chased any particular rank in the organisation. I've loved what I've done, and enjoyment probably contributes to doing something well. And when you do something well, opportunities evolve in front of you, and you take that step, and it leads to something else. So I don't feel like I'm finished as commissioner, but that's a matter for the Premier in terms of my contract arrangements.
Yep.
But I'm not looking too far ahead. And at some point in the relatively near future, my time as commissioner will come to an end. And I don't know what the next step is, but I'm interested to find out. And I don't have any anxiety about that. We'll see what happens.
Might come as a welcome relief.
Oh, look, I really do enjoy my job.
Yeah.
And I'll miss aspects of it. But I probably won't miss having to have my phone with me all the time. Yeah.
We'll put a partition. I think I want to see you in there for 10 more years, mate. So I don't want anyone else in the role. I think the public will probably stand by me on that as well.
Well, like I said, it's a matter for the Premier, but I've got to say I've been very well supported by both Stephen Marshall and Peter Malinauskas, and that certainly makes it easier for me to do my job.
I'm trying to get Peter on the show, so we'll if he does come on, I'll put in the good word for you. There's some quick fire questions as we round up. We're big readers here at Creating Synergy. We read a lot of books, knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom is a very core value of our business. So reading is a big part of that, or learning or development. What's a book you're reading right now?
David Baldacci, The Simple Truth.
Oh, yes. Good?
So far, so good.
Far,
yeah.
halfway through.
The hook's in. Yeah, I'm about a quarter of the way through.
Yeah, great.
If I get past the first 30 pages, I tend to finish. I'm a finisher. So
you are? Yeah.
Even if I don't enjoy it, I'll finish it.
Yeah. Oh, really? You just have to grind through it?
Yeah.
I used to be that way. I read differently now. I actually read just for knowledge. I think I'm one of the definitely the younger crew that come through and go, I need short impact and short. Yeah. So I used to read the full book, but now it's like, I only need that chapter. That's the part that I need to learn.
I suppose with fiction, you've got to follow the story.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, no, I'm talking purely non-fiction. What self-development book do you feel stands out of the crowd? Do you read any self-development books, or have you put much effort into that?
I have in the past, but none really stand out. There's a really small book that I was quite impressed with, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah. Spencer Johnson.
It's just, very simple, but, impactful. And there was the 7 habits of highly effective people. And not the whole book. I didn't get through the entire book, but there was one part that talked about the circle of concern and the circle of influence. Yeah. And that principle stuck with me in terms of, I suppose, managing stress is don't waste energy on stuff you can't influence. It's good to be aware of those things, but put your energies into the area. Sorry, only focus on what you can influence, not what concerns you if you can't influence it.
Well, if you've got no control over it, what are you worried about?
You should be aware.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's balance there.
It's planning.
That one element of that book stuck with me.
100%. I love that book. Synergy is one of the 7 habits, right? So that's why we kind of use it. What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
Don't procrastinate.
Yeah. So you're a big procrastinator?
I do some of my best work under pressure, and you can create that pressure by not getting on with it. Yeah. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can put off until the day after tomorrow. So, I describe it as procrastination, but I don't think it genuinely is procrastination. I'll look at something and I might put it to the side of my desk, but I don't necessarily separate it from my thinking.
No.
So when you do come back to the file, you have just that subconscious processing, I think, gives you more capacity to make the right call on those tough things.
You generally know gut feel though up front, don't you? And
Yeah,
you sit on it for a few days and then you go, I'm going to go with my gut anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose reflecting on my experience with high school and the way I've sort of been through my policing career is, and I said I wasn't a very well-applied student in high school, and if I was talking to people in high school now, and I said this to a group of students just the other day, don't cut short your opportunities for the future by taking the easy path right now. You know, make sure you find that right balance. You know, invest in this opportunity to develop yourself so you've got more opportunities or more choices once you get out of that schooling environment.
I love that. That's brilliant. If you could invite 3 people for dinner, who would they be?
Now, that's a tough question. Actually, I don't know the answer to that question. I've never really turned my mind to it. Well, it wouldn't be Nicola or Stephen Marshall because I had a lot to do with them.
I was going to throw it in there, but
maybe Donald Trump.
Oh wow!
Only not because I subscribe to his political views or condone any of his behaviours, but I just think it would be a bizarre experience to see that up close.
It would be.
Yeah.
He would be. It would be a strange conversation. There's just unraveling the thoughts that goes on in that person's head.
And I seriously don't subscribe to his thinking.
I get.
It's just.
I get your point.
It's a freak show.
Yeah.
So that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other 2.
Anyone you look up to?
I can't answer that question. I find that really hard to. You're sort of off the cuff.
Yeah.
I'd just be picking names, and I don't know that
whether they've actually got any thought.
I'll come back in a week and I'll let you know. The other
that'd
2.
be amazing.
And Donald Trump probably wouldn't make the final cut.
I wouldn't have thought. I think you're valid.
You see enough of him through social media to offend you.
I do understand what you say though. Like from a human behaviour point of view, I just want to understand what is going on in that person's brain.
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes about the shift in our society where someone like that gets to a position of such significance.
It doesn't
with so many followers.
It doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
Be honest. Be true to yourself. And deal with people with honesty. Don't try to be something you're not, because most people have a great bullshit detector and they know when they're being snowed. So, and I try to do that in all of my interactions with people in the community, other people within the SAPOL. People know when you're not being genuine, and that does more harm than good. And I don't think you can be successful as a senior leader in any field if you aren't genuine.
Agreed. If you had a time machine, where would you go? Back or forward? You had one trip, back or forward?
I think I'd go forward.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How far?
Probably not too far. Maybe I think we're in such an interesting time right now in human history.
Yeah.
You know, you can find out what happened in the past. Unless you want to live the experience, why would you go back? Whereas having some ability to see how this current mess is going to unfold, I think that would be really interesting. You look at the challenge. Get away from the economy. Get away from the cost of living and energy prices, but start to look at what's going to be the impact of this green agenda. And the shift away from fossil fuels. How's that going to impact on our communities? How society is going to shift. We see more people moving from regional locations into built-up urban areas. I just think we're at a point in time where things are really shifting quite significantly, and maybe I should say I would go beyond where I'm probably going to live to, so I can see how things look after that, because I'm going to find out eventually in the time that I'm going to be here. So take a couple of steps beyond that to see what it
yeah.
looks like.
Then you know when you're going to live to. And that's kind of annoying. Isn't it?
Yeah, I think we can all going well. It's
just say 200 years because either way.
Exactly.
That's right.
Let's say I've got more behind me than I have ahead of me.
That's right. If your house was on fire and your family and pets, everything was all safe, what's one item you'd run back in and save?
My bike.
Your bike.
What
type of bike is it?
A Cervelo.
Oh, yeah, beautiful bike.
I should reflect on that, though, because if that's lost in the fire, the insurance company will pay for a new bike. So
It's right. If it's insured.
probably maybe my Kindle.
Yeah.
I can buy another one of them too.
And it's all on your Amazon account, so you can just get it.
Yeah. These are the rash decisions you're making.
No photos, nothing?
Look,
Family heirloom?
they're all digital now.
Everything's
too.
digital, that's right. Agreed. If you had one...
And I'd probably perish in the fire because if I look for the box of old photos, I can't remember where they are. So
it's in the attic somewhere.
Yeah.
If you had one superhero power, what would it be?
I'd have trouble choosing. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't do it?
Invisibility would be great.
Yeah, it's a bit creepy.
See, that says more about you than it does me. I was thinking about being able to just disappear into the crowd. So things are getting too hard. I'll just go invisible.
You're right. Invisibility would be cool. It's one of the. It's just I always throw that in whenever someone says just to throw them off a little bit.
I'm a bit worried about you now. I know what you're thinking, and it's disgraceful.
I'm not saying that in front of the police commissioner.
Yeah.
What's your now? You have to. And I don't care how long we sit here.
Okay.
But surely...
I'm sure you'll cut the stony silence out.
You're a father of 5. What's your best dad joke?
There's probably a couple. But,
yes, beautiful. This is what I want.
My go-to would be my friend David lost his ID. Now he's just Dav.
Oh, I love it.
I actually store dad jokes on my phone.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Have you got any more? There's got to be one more. Do you actually have a friend called Dave?
Yeah, I do.
David?
I do.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You would have said that to him 1,000 times.
He loves it. He thinks it's great. Yeah.
Don't worry about going into more jokes. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been an amazing, amazing chat. Thank you for agreeing to come on first and foremost. But kudos to you and the team and everything that you guys have been doing and you have done, especially over the past couple of years. I don't want to discount your career in police just for the past couple of years, but it has been, and like I said earlier, it has been really great seeing such a calming influence on the TV and having belief in the person who is the state coordinator and going, actually, I think we got the right person in that spot. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you for that. But let me finish by saying, I had that profile position for COVID-19, but the people that were working with me and for me right across the organisation deserve due credit, and really importantly, the community of South Australia. Like, you think about what we imposed on almost every single person who lives here, and the willingness to play their part made it possible for me to do what I did. So I don't think that could happen in too many places around the world. No. We should be proud of that as a community.
No doubt. And I think that we should never discount, and I don't think anyone is discounting the team that you had behind you. The leader is only as good as the team and the people that he or she is surrounded by. So, well done to everyone in the organisation and the broader community. Thank you very much for your time. We'll continue watching with eagerness how your career unfolds from here on in, and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you and find out more about us at synergyiq.com.au. I am going to ask though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.